The topic for discussion is software vulnerability and viruses. So we will continue our discussion on software vulnerability, but add some more topic for today's discussion, and that is called virus now. But let's have the brief recall of what we discussed. We have given you proper definition of a software vulnerability, that is a flaw present in the application software or in operating system. We have given you also example of what is an operating system. Linux, Unix, Windows, they all are different kinds of operating system, but the prime responsibility of operating system is to control the resources. What are the resources we have in a computer system? We have a memory, we have a processor, we have input output devices, we have a file system. So operating system controls these kinds of resources or assets of a computers now. And there is application software which is what a programmer does. Any organization has lots of area for computerization, and each such activity will be application software. Software vulnerability is defined as a problem that is potentially so dangerous that it threatens the proper functioning of the computer systems. We have given you on a small example of common software vulnerability. Most common software vulnerability is called buffer overflow. Vulnerability exists in all types of software. It's not only in the particular type of from particular organizations or company which makes a software. It exists all across. Several versions of the MS Windows OS were open to the attack. The popular browsers like Firefox or the what we call them Internet Explorer also had lots of flaws, and they keep on publishing it, and accordingly they come with different kinds of patches which are automatically loaded in your system if an individual gives a permission to that. As software vulnerability are discovered regularly, and ideally vendors release patches, it is critical to install these patches as soon as they become available. Many operating systems provide PC and automated patching capability as long as you are allowed to do so. Already discussed this point. We have also discussed in the previous that the most common software security vulnerability is buffer overflow, SQL injections, OS command injection, and some others are listed here. Buffer overflow already has been discussed in earlier discussions now. So main objective of discussion on this presentation is this one, that will define what is the virus, what are the symptoms of computer virus, what are classification of viruses, and what are different types of viruses. Before we come to the virus, let me just define the most common software vulnerability which we have listed here. The most common software security vulnerability are OS command injections, SQL injection, third parties library, and the buffer overflow. Let's talk the remaining ones. SQL is a query language that was designed to manage the data stored in the relational databases. Today, relational database is the primary database. Most of the commercial database has a relational database because of its simplicity. And SQL is a query language which manipulates the data stored in form of these relations, the data stored in the relational databases. In the relational databases, data are stored in form of tables. You can have multiple tables for employee, table for billing system. So depending upon the type of problem which you have, you can identify the data, and then accordingly data has to be stored in a particular kind of table. The student's data, employee data, and some other data depending upon your requirement. And SQL is a structured query language which manipulates this data stored in these tables. SQL is not only a query language, they do some more other works also. Like for example, they can define the security constraints, security to particular table or security to particular column. So SQL injection is a code injections technique that might destroy your databases. SQL injection is one of the most common web hacking techniques. SQL injection is the placement of malicious code or malicious software or in the SQL statements via web page inputs. So when you learn SQL, you will learn lots of its statements, which is basically makes a query to the in databases now. So SQL injection is the process for placing the malicious code in the SQL statement. Then comes to the OS command injection. It is so SQL injection is also kind of attacked on these systems. OS command injection is another kind of attack technique used to exploit websites or server by executing operating system commands through manipulation of application input. So when you learn operating system, you learn operating system commands. When you learn SQL, you learn SQL query statements now. OS command injection is a type of web security vulnerability that permits an attacker to execute arbitrary operating system commands on the server that is running an application, which can damage the application and all its relevant data. There is another, the common computer vulnerability, software vulnerability, is a third-party library. Third-party library and the frameworks released by those people are very popular with the software developers, as they save lots of time in not having to invent the wheel. However, the reliance on something which is not created in-house could mean introducing vulnerability into the software of which one is not unaware of. So basically, this is a common practice that everything is not developed in the organizations. They try to hire some organization which develop the software for them. So the last line is into the software of which one is not aware of, that should be written. The software, the malicious software is popularly known as a malware, which is an acronym for malicious software. Discussed already, this point has been emphasized earlier. Malware does nothing useful but rather more harmful. There are several types of malware, each of which has a different goals and follow different approaches to propagation in these systems. A computer virus is one type of malware that inserts its virus code to multiply itself by altering the programs and its applications. The computer gets infected through the replications of malicious codes. Computer viruses come in different forms to infect the system in different way. For example, there is a boot sector virus. When virus is executed, it tries to replicate itself into another executable code. So to the point, you must understand the virus is basically a small fragment of code. So when this code is executed, it tries to replicate itself into another executable code which is existing in the systems. When it succeeds to infect that code, the code is said to be infected. The infected code, when run, can infect new code in turn. So this is the way things get replicated. The viruses are self-replicating. It replicates by being copied or initiating its copying to another program, computer boot sector, or a document. The virus can be transmitted as attachment to an email. So when you send email, virus can get attached with it, download that file, and can be present on a diskette of it. So it can be attached with the email, or it can be will be attached with your file, or it can be present on the infected disk. Some viruses start their effects as soon as their code is executed. Other viruses stay dormant unless circumstances cause their code to be executed by the computer. What are the symptoms of computer virus? 1. Slow system performance, frequent system crashes, more and more emails being sent from the individual's email account, and changes to the individual's home page or passwords. These are few symptoms, but there could be many other symptoms also. Some viruses start their effects as soon as their code is executed. And the last point is important. Generally speaking, viruses hide within computer files rather than sitting out in open in a separate form. Viruses are classified on basis of their mode of existence, and there are 3 categories of viruses. There is a boot infectors or boot sector infectors, the system infectors, general executable programs infected, and we will now try to explain all these categories of viruses. Let me start with the boot sector virus now. A boot sector virus infects the first sector of the hard drive, having the master boot record, short form MBR. The MBR stores the disk primary partitions table. Table which keeps information about the partitions which has been created in the disk, and to store bootstrapping instructions which are executed after the computer's BIOS, basic input output system, passes executions to the machine code. If a computer is infected with boot sector virus, already explained in the beginning, when the computer is turned on, the virus launches immediately and is loaded into the memory, enabling it to control the computer. So partition table is a table maintained on a disk by operating system describing the partitions of the disk. If the partition table is lost, users are unable to read or write new data on the disk. The traditional partitioning scheme, what called MBR partition, saves partitions in informations on the first sector of the disk, MBS sector. That information is stored into the MBR sectors. Each partition entry is 16 bytes and the total is 64 bytes. Therefore, partitions table is limited to a maximum of 4 entries. But many people want to create more than 4 partitions, so the extended partition is introduced for this demand. Each partition entry is 16 byte and the total is this one. So this already has been discussed. The boot sector virus, let's have discussion on the boot sector. Boot sector typically creates bad sectors. Boot infectors are the type which once loaded could stay in the memory until the system is shut off and the disk is reformatted. Boot sector viruses infect the boot sector or the portion table of a disk. The computer systems are typically infected by these viruses when started with floppy disk viruses. Let's move to the second kind of virus now. The system infectors differ from the boot sector virus in the sense that the system infector gains control after the computer is booted and infects a hard disk or bootable floppies which contain the appropriate system files. The system infectors have another peculiarity that may activate after a given period of time or may instantly begin subtle modifications in the system processing, such as increasing the time to perform system function, scrambling of data, or modification of system error messages or information messages. Move to the third one. The viruses of these types are most dangerous and devastating. I am talking about general executable program infected virus. They attach themselves to program files and can spread to almost any executable programs in any system. These viruses change the original program instructions into a jump to its code and follow that code with return to the original program. The last point is very important. These viruses change the original program instruction into a jump to its own code and follow that code with a return to the original program. So this way they try to modify the program. They are jump statements. As a result, whenever the program is executed, the virus gets loaded and executed first and then allows the original program to proceed. It remains memory resident and infects each and every program that is loaded for executions. Memory resident means it stays in the main memory and infects each and every program that is loaded for execution. You know that program gets executed once it is loaded into the main memory. This kind of viruses always stay in memory and infect each and every program that is loaded for executions. By attaching themselves to .exe or .com files, they alter the size of the file. Sometimes multiple infections renders program files too large to be accommodated in the memory. There is some difference between the exe file and the .com file that was existing in earlier operating system, this kind of division. And exe is a short form for executable, is a file extension for an executable file format. It is a binary file that contains much more complex executable binary code. A .com file was a DOS executable and nowadays is same as .exe. A COM file can be viewed as a replica of the way the program will be seen in main memory, whereas an .exe file experiences further relocation of the time of running, thus beginning with a relocations header. So how this is allocated or this is stored into the main memory, that makes a difference between the COM file and the exe file. So let me just differentiate between the COM file and the exe file. This kind of distinction was existing in the earlier operating system, the DOS disk operating system. That an.exe, this short form for executable, is a file extension for an executable file format. It is a binary file that contains a much more complex executable binary code. A .com file was a DOS executable and nowadays is same as .exe. The COM file can be viewed as a replica of the way the program will be seen in main memory, whereas an .exe file experiences further relocations at the time of running, thus begin with relocations. So how they are allocated main memory, that way this makes a difference between the two. Virus list has become a non-ending entity with new viruses joining the list every other day. The most commonly prevalent viruses in the computer industry is of course the boot sector virus. It infects the boot sector of the hard disk system, executing every system is booted, every time the system is booted. Infects other bootable media like floppy disks. This is a microvirus written in high level language, unlike most viruses which are written in low level language. So let's say we talk high level language, C programming, you can say or C++, Pascal, Ada, Java, they all are called high level programming language. But there are some programming, there is programming language, assembly programming language is called low level programming language. In high level programming languages, like for example when you write a program C or C++, you are not basically concerned with the internal details of any machine, like what is the word length of a machine, how many registers are there, what is the size of memory, and other details. You are not basically concerned. But when you write a program in assembly language, you are basically concerned with these features of a machine, and that makes a difference between. So writing a program in high level language is much more easier than writing a program in low level language, because there you have to be concerned about the lower details of the machine. Microvirus is always written in high level language, unlike most viruses which are written in a low level language. Microviruses are triggered when a program capable of executing a macro is run. For example, a spreadsheet files may contain macro virus. Now you have there is called macro, and we have a macro is a small code in a program. So whenever you use this macro, everywhere it gets replicated in the program itself. Source code virus, it looks for source code and modify this to include viruses and to help us spread it widely. So there are different kinds of viruses we have listed, and I told you that they are not only ones, but there are many other ones which are getting uploaded, getting invented every time. There is another virus called polymorphic virus. It is characterized by a frequent change of its signature. A virus signature, this is what exactly we mean by signature, that is what explained in the next line. A virus signature is a pattern that can identify a virus, a series of bytes that make up virus code. And in order to avoid detections by antivirus, a polymorphic virus changes each time it is installed. The functionality of the virus remains same, but its signature is changed. Encrypted virus is another kind of virus. In order to avoid detections by antivirus, this type of virus exists in encrypted form. It contains a decryption algorithm along with it. So the virus first decrypts and then executes. There is stealth virus, a very tricky virus which causes the code to change that can be used to detect it. Detection of virus becomes very difficult due to change of the code. Example, it can change the read system call or read call such that whenever you ask to read a code modified by virus, the original form of the code is shown rather than the infected code. That is called tunneling virus. The virus attempts to bypass detections by antivirus scanner by installing itself in the interrupt handler chain. Interceptions programs which remain in the background of an operating system and catches the viruses becomes disabled during that course of tunneling virus. Similar viruses install themselves in device drivers. They are called multipartite virus, capable to infect multiple parts of the system including boot sector, memory and files. This makes it difficult to detect and contain. And this armored virus, difficult to catch by antivirus software. It uses a variety of techniques to do so, like fooling antivirus to believe that it lies somewhere else than its real location, or using a compression to complicate its code. So this is what we have discussed. Now we discuss most common security vulnerability. In this case, we identify three kinds of vulnerability. The buffer overflow was the one which was introduced in the previous presentation, and in this presentation we discussed two more kinds of common security vulnerability, that was called the SQL code injections and operating system command injections. Then we define a virus, what exactly the virus is. Then we also identify different kinds of systems. If your system is infected with computer virus, like for example system gets slowed, then we also classify a different kinds of viruses. Give you three kinds of classification. Let's say boot sector virus was one of them. It was also discussed in the previous slide. And also what are the different types of viruses. We gave a number of different types, but that type is not in end itself. Every day some new type of virus are being invented. Thank you.